So fellas, we're kind of on an auto rifle kick right now. I don't know why. I've just been enjoying them. One of them was Skatelock, a 600 round per minute kinetic auto rifle that we talk very highly of, as it came with things like 20 zoom, great perk combinations, and lots of god rolls for both PvE and for PvP. However, many of you actually ended up sending me screenshots of your favorite god rolled Last Breath, which was actually a Trials of the non-weapon way back in year 1. And I just gotta say, aesthetically, I find that the Trials of the non-weapons are some of the most beautiful weapons in the game, Last Breath included. Now guys, we're gonna continue doing reviews just like this one. However, I am taking into account what you request down below in the comment section. We made that Skatelock review, and a lot of you actually requested Last Breath to be looked at, so feel free to comment whatever weapon it is you want us to look at. We'll track some god rolls down and go from there, because I do plan on reviewing every legendary weapon that we have not reviewed over the next 3 weeks. So needless to say, we've got our work cut out for us. With that being said though guys, let's talk about the Last Breath. First up, again, it's an auto rifle in the kinetic slot, shoots at 600 rounds per minute, and just looking at the snapshot here of its random rolls, you can already start seeing some things here that look pretty potent, including the likes of dynamic sway reduction and rangefinder. This was a perk combination that many of us liked on Gilliard, and I know a lot of people keep saying, go Cross, it's Galliard. I don't believe you. To me, it's Gilliard, okay? Like a Gilligan's Island. Now, Gilliard had this same combination, dynamic sway reduction, rangefinder, super potent. It had a hell of a lot of reach, especially in combination with its zoom modifying scopes. But for Last Breath, no, Last Breath doesn't have any scopes. Matter of fact, it only has barrel perks, which is the vast majority of auto rifles. That's kind of what made Skatelock special, is because Skatelock, even though it does have barrel perks, comes with default 20 zoom, meaning it has substantially greater range than all other base 16 zoom auto rifles, which includes the Last Breath. Now the Last Breath does have some things there that make it stand out, including better stability by default, better handling, a slightly larger magazine, more aim assist, yada yada. Pros and cons to both of these. The question is, would you have rather just taken an auto rifle with more zoom, therefore more range, over a base 16 zoom auto? Well, when we actually sat down and did a range test here, a high range Last Breath with rangefinder can reach up to only 33 meters. Now, I say only 33 meters, that's still relatively good to other auto rifles. Now, it's not as good as Skatelock, because last week, when we reviewed Skatelock, we could reach up to 38 meters. So we're talking a 5 meter difference here, just from going from 16 zoom to 20 zoom. Now, I was hoping that rangefinder would mitigate that difference there in range. That rangefinder would be the perk that allowed Last Breath to rise up to the level that Skatelock was at. And unfortunately, that was not the case. It's still decent range, but nothing like crazy, right? Now, the combination of dynamic sway and rangefinder is still a wonderful combination. Dynamic sway especially, as it increases accuracy and stability while continuously holding down the trigger. You can imagine this on certain weapons, especially weapons that shoot fast, like a 600 round per minute auto rifle. This kicks in dynamic sway pretty quickly, and it actually turns the weapon to be more vertical. So even if your weapon doesn't have the best vertical recoil, which is what we're trying to get to, dynamic sway can really level those things out for you. Overall, guys, this roll really flexed the capabilities of Last Breath. I thought the weapon handled itself better, at least better than the 2.6 rating that people are giving it over on Light GG. But considering that this weapon has some very unique perks, especially new perks, we wanted to try out things like Adagio. Now guys, Adagio does two things when you get a kill. It actually drops the charge rate or the fire rate of your weapon, but simultaneously though, it increases the damage. To me guys, it's just like another version of focus fire, but requires a kill to activate. Now for other weapons, including Last Breath, this is a drop by about 15% in its rate of fire, and about an increase by 25% in its damage. And what you realistically have to do in these situations is figure out whether or not it's more beneficial than other damage perks within that same column, and if actually turning this weapon into a semi-focus fire weapon is really something you want. For Last Breath, it was actually all right. Again, base time to kill value for this weapon is 0.8 seconds at 600 rounds per minute. When you actually activate Adagio though, this does drop it down to about 500, and I think mathematically it's supposed to be around 510. So it's still faster than that of 450 round per minute autos. Now its damage actually increases to 29 damage per crit and 18 per body, matching that of Precision's seconds, but again, slightly faster, meaning its time to kill value actually goes from that base 0.8 to about a 0.71. Now, it's not a ginormous drop there in time to kill value. It's obvious that this perk is like a double-edged perk, where in certain weapons, I would find Adagio may not actually be helpful. For this specific role though, it was actually really good. Adagio and Killing Wind. Killing Wind actually increases mobility, weapon range, and handling for a short duration, and considering that this role right here does not have rangefinder, I am limited in its range. I think I was able to reach up to like 30.5, 31 meters with this last breath, but when I would actually get a kill, Killing Wind would activate, which is so very good for a lot of reasons. The range bump, but even like the more subtle things like the mobility bump and handling. That in combination with Adagio was really, really nice, as both of these perks would activate at the exact same time and would last the same duration. You want perks that synergize well, and a huge way to make sure perks synergize well is to make sure these perks don't fight against each other. Hence why things like Heating Up and Rampage go so well together, whereas perks like Tunnel Vision and Kill Clip synergize so well together. Same concept here, Adagio and Killing Wind also work so well together. Now, quite honestly, dropping the rate of fire from 600 to 500, 510 was actually pretty nice. This resulted in me maintaining crit shots at a more level pace. So much so that sometimes I was like, yo, I kind of wish this thing just stayed at 500 rounds per minute at all times. It was just more manageable. And with it hitting the same damage as 450s, even though we're not looking at like this huge, ginormous bump there in damage, it was still appreciated and allowed me to chain multi-kills back to back. Now, this role really pushed me to start reconsidering what I thought the God role was for the last breath. Because originally I was going into this thinking that dynamic sway and rangefinder, that's just the combination that we've always loved in the past. But after seeing that the range really only increased to about 33 meters at best, I started to treat the last breath a little differently. I wanted to bring my opponents close to me within that 30-meter range and duel out with them on my primary. Bait shotgunners in, bait the lanes, but in close enough territory, way different than the playstyle we were incorporating with Scathe Lock. Scathe Lock was one of those auto rifles that we could square up out in the open in those mid ranges and still come out on top. You can't do that with Last Breath, even with a dynamic sway rangefinder role. Instead, I want you to overcommit to the mid to short mid range with combinations like the one you see here, Adagio and Killing Wind. It's much better than what I expected, guys. I was not expecting Adagio to actually work here, but it does. And I was pleasantly surprised with how lethal Adagio actually felt. Now, granted, this is not the case for other weapons with Adagio. I would actually say on certain weapons, Adagio makes the weapon worse, but for Last Breath, that was not the case. Now, I do want to talk about recoil direction for a moment. If you notice, it sits at 56, meaning it's got a slight right bounce. Now, normally, for most auto rifles, we just throw on a counterbalance mod and maybe some barrel perks that can influence that recoil direction. I threw on a counterbalance mod, and guys, I'm here to tell you, I feel like the recoil got worse. So I don't know if I would suggest counterbalance on this weapon. Instead, though, I did get to play with Arrowhead Brake, which did increase my handling speed as well as my recoil direction by 30. This actually kicked things up to 86 recoil direction. And then if you want, you can do Arrowhead Brake with counterbalance to go ahead and overcommit there to your recoil direction and just max it out. That's completely up to you. I just felt like for me personally, Arrowhead Brake was the play, regardless of whether or not I was rocking counterbalance. Now, considering that we're using this weapon as like a dueling based weapon, I know ricochet rounds increases that range and stability. And for my controller players, you can still rock that. I think high caliber rounds though is really the play. You've got a weapon here that's going to pepper opponents. And there were many times without high caliber rounds on this auto rifle that I would get sniped while unloading on the enemy. Now, I know we can blame flinch all day long. We could talk about how Bungie needs to rework flinch, whatever. Right now, we live in the here and now. And here and now, this auto rifle just does not do enough flinch all on its own, which means you're going to need a little bit of help. High caliber rounds will be that extra bit of help that may enable you to win those duels. All in all, guys, I actually found Last Breath to be a good auto rifle, but it has some limitations. And for the most part, I think I would choose Scathe Lock over it inside of PvP. However, the quirky combinations like Adagio and Killing Wind was actually really nice. Now, for my PvE players, I didn't play with Last Breath inside of PvE much. We primarily just played inside of PvP, so forgive me for not having PvE gameplay, but let me just be real. Choosing a weapon inside of PvE, it doesn't really matter how it feels. It comes down to its roles. And look, Demolitionist, Adrenaline Junkie, fellas, that is just shouting at you. We know Adrenaline Junkie is going to be getting a sizable buff, or so we've been led to believe. The fact that Grenade Final Blows will grant us a bonus damage, and and we're thinking it's going to chain back to back, in combination with Demolitionist, which returns us our grenade energy, it's a no-brainer. You've also got other combinations like Subsistence and Frenzy. Subsistence and One for All especially. Is Adagio the play inside of PvE? In my opinion, it can be, but you got some great perks here outside of Adagio. One for All is really easy to proc on an auto rifle. Just spray a group of enemies and you're off to the races with a ginormous bump there in damage, with Subsistence constantly feeding you. And of course, Frenzy is still a very nice perk despite the recent nerf it got this past season. Again, the big one that I'm really banking on being the play is Adrenaline Junkie and Demolitionist. The only perk that we really haven't covered here is Ensemble, where it actually improves handling and reload speed when allies are nearby. And I would say inside of content where you do have teammates that are close to you, it's a noticeable difference. I rock Ensemble on a couple of other weapons and you see it, you feel it. It's not game breaking, but those bumps there to both of those stats, especially reload speed, is pretty nice. Would you take it over something like Subsistence, which pretty much auto reloads your weapon with every single kill? No, but still, for its passive benefits, you can appreciate it. So guys, that is our review for The Last Breath. Try it out for yourselves. It's got some combinations that I think are only going to get better with the upcoming buffs. For PvP, I really did like that Adagio combo with Killing Wind. And for 1v1 scenarios, you can never go wrong with Dynamic Sway and Rangefinder. Although understand Rangefinder on certain weapons really does mess up the target acquisition due to that bump there in its zoom. That's something that I did notice here with The Last Breath. The base zoom of the weapon being 16, living within that zone, that's really where that weapon performs the best at. And I find that Rangefinder can kind of mess with those things. So keep that in mind. Try out a couple of rolls. Try that Adagio roll, guys, and it may surprise you. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.